Hello, everybody, and welcome to This is What a Fencer Looks Like. This is episode 6, and it is Olympic Legacies Part 2, the Massialas Foundation. Today, we'll be focusing on Greg Massialas and the foundation that he created, and also the athletes that foundation has produced. Specifically, we'll be talking about the Olympic success of the foundation, of the Massialas Foundation, and their model for success. We'll be speaking about Greg Massialas and what he's done, and then also the athletes that he's produced and how they have impacted the visibility and representation of Asian American and multicultural athletes. So I'm super excited for that. I've been awaiting a minute to produce this. I've had this vision for a minute. Just as a reminder, This is What a Fencer Looks Like was created through the Aspire to Inspire initiative as a means to increase visibility of fencers from different backgrounds, create more personalized and authentic relationships between our community and the represented athletes, and also to learn about athlete-specific narratives and why they're involved in fencing and what that involvement means for them. So without further ado, let's get into our panelists. A brief overview before we get into the specific interviews. We're going to be having Greg Massialas, Doris Willette, and Alexander Massialas in this episode. So let's get started. Let me introduce you guys to Greg Massialas. Before becoming an Olympic coach, Greg Massialas was first an Olympic fencer in the weapon of men's foil. He had a great success in his fencing career and represented Team USA in 3 Olympic Games. After retiring from fencing, Massialas founded the Massialas Foundation in January of 1998. The goal of the Massialas Foundation, as stated on their website, is to bring out the champion that exists inside all of the kids through the Olympic sport and the ancient art of fencing in a fun yet challenging way. I can get behind that. Since its creation, Massialas has helped cultivate national team members, Olympians, Olympic medalists, including Garrick Meinhardt, Doris Willette, Alexander Massialas, Sabrina Massialas, and more. In his personal time, Greg is an avid skier. He likes eating good food and eating good wine, or drinking good wine, and he loves his electric motorcycle. He also enjoys travel, family, and new experiences, which his position as a coach allows him to do. Let's hear what Greg had to say during his interview. First question for you, Greg, is how did you get introduced to fencing and the fencing community?
I got introduced into fencing way back in 1967, actually. We had just come to the United States. I was born in Greece, actually. My mother was English, and we had moved to the United States in December of '66 and moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I was a competitive swimmer. And that summer, my dad said, you should try something else in addition to swimming, what to do, and both parents are working, blah, blah, blah. And so, he said, oh, look, there's fencing. And actually at the time, I didn't even know what the word fencing was in English, quite honestly. I had never run across it. And so then offered it at Ann Arbor Park and Rec. And sure enough, I did it, and I really enjoyed it. Being a competitive swimmer, I was in really great shape. So that was actually to my advantage. And, there were a lot of bigger kids, but I was also left-handed. That also helped, I think. And it was a lot of fun, and kind of like stuck with it. One thing led to another. And, then eventually, several years later, we actually found out like what fencing was really all about. A couple years later, and then we would go to into the Detroit area, which is an hour drive each way, to fence with the Maestro Donashi at that time, who was a coach at Wayne State and had his own studio. I was also fortunate that I went to the Junior World Championships in 1971 as a young 14-year-old. And because I was a Greek citizen at the time, I actually fenced in the Junior Worlds at 14. And I went there with all kinds of delusions of grandeur, but was sort of shocked at what the reality of fencing was all about. But it really opened my eyes and kind of made things happen. And I always use the analogy, Alexander, when I was 14, I got my first electric foil at Christmas. And we used to go and fence with some Ann Arbor Ann Arbor fencing club with some University of Michigan students. And so then that electric foil. At age of 14, Alexander, before Christmas, had won a Div 1 national tournament. So it's a little different perspective.
That's
a long way about it.
but that's that's generational wealth and knowledge. You guys, you may not have known much about fencing when you were going in, but then you knew a lot of fencing kind of when Alexander and Sabrina were growing up.
Right.
My next question is, you didn't really touch on it, right? But you went from being someone who didn't know a lot about fencing, was a very avid swimmer, to a multiple-time Olympic fencer, which in itself is awesome and amazing. But my next question for you is, after being an Olympian, which is what most people consider kind of the pinnacle of sports, of any sport, what inspired you to transition into becoming a coach, and even more so attempting to become an Olympic level coach, which you can argue is then the highest level of coaching that you could possibly achieve?
Well, it was kind of like, it's actually my wife that got me into it. After I finished competing, and even the last 4 years, I was working full time in advertising, and I was quite successful, and actually had met my wife, and we had done all kinds of stuff. The last year I was competing, and then the Seoul Olympics happened. And I said, that's it, that's the end of that one. But at the same time, I had been a referee, and I had gotten my international license like at way back in the early 80s sometime, just because I happened to be there, and it was reasonably simple at that time. And so I went, and then I would actually referee a lot of times when I was at the tournament. They would ask me to referee because I was knowledgeable, and they knew I knew what I was talking about after you're eliminated and you were using. And actually back in those days, we would referee a lot of like the NACs. Like I would referee all the women's matches, for example. So I, usually several of us in that sort of era would referee. So I kind of got involved with that, and I got involved right afterwards. I was like the World Championships '89 referee, and kind of went through the whole period. So even though I was working full time in advertising, I was in touch with the highest level of fencing, which was really important because I didn't lose it. I was there in the midst of what's going on. And then my wife kept telling me, you know so much, because she traveled with me to some of these World Cups. I was, doing different things. And she said to me, this is really something you can do. She's a piano teacher as well. And so it was something that's kind of like natural. Why aren't you coaching fencing? I said, well, it's really not something that I feel like we can do. I had a lot of responsibilities and all kinds of stuff. And so I felt like, but she just persisted at me. And she goes, you know so much, you just really should do it. She goes, you can make history. Those were her words. And so I said, okay, let me look at it. Let me see how I can sort of make it work and what to do. And I looked around a little bit. I didn't really see much of what I felt was going to be, if I was going to do something in fencing, I wanted to develop champions. So it wasn't just like I want to be a coach. That wasn't my goal. My goal was to be a coach, but my goal was to really develop champions. And, sort of being frustrated from the days as an athlete, that we had a lot of challenges when we were competing back in the days. You can ask Peter Westbrook and Sabre, or myself and foil, or whatever happened to be, in the whole generation of us, that probably could have been a lot more successful, a lot of things. But things were changing internationally, things were more fair. And so I felt like we had a good opportunity to succeed. And then Bucky had also started, with the women a little bit, doing some success. So basically, it was my wife sort of nudged me along. And then when we were actually applying to Alexander's school for pre-K, which was the Chinese American International School, the headmaster said, oh, you need to start a fencing program here. She found a 3-time Olympian. She goes, it was a very good academic school, but there wasn't so much sports. And so she, oh, you need to start a fencing program here. And then that's sort of how it started, in these after school classes. And then one thing led to another. And I was like, okay, well, these things kind of get a little too big. And, the other thing my wife also insisted upon, she goes, you are really so good, but also, you're passionate about it. You really enjoy, I was traveling with the girls, I'd be helping, doing different things. mostly with the girls, sometimes with guys, but especially that era, our best fencers were the women's foil fencers. So I tend to travel with those girls. And I'm talking about Iris, Felicia, Ann Marsh, that whole, group, Susie Paxton, etc. And so it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do now? So I needed to kind of like decide. And so I said, okay, one of the problems is the fencers, fencing coaches, they come in, they teach fencing, but they don't really have a plan. So I said, if I'm going to do this, I need to have a plan. And coming from the business side of things and advertising, it was sort of like, okay, I need to set up a plan and then I can look at what's going on. So I created this like plan of what I thought was important. And, it was sort of like a fairly advanced youth fencing in the US at that point in time. Not really as strong as it is now, but pretty solid at that time. And so it was a matter of like, okay, let me see what I need to do. How do I set up things? And then I had to develop, obviously, the pedagogy. That's the other thing, is like, there was nobody around doing things. I said, if I'm going to do it, these are the benchmarks I need to have. But
and at this point, you're shifting from, okay, I'm doing these after school programs at the school, to thinking about creating your own program, like your own schooling, your own, like fencing club, fencing school.
Right. Well, this is my thought. It's kind of like, I've got these classes, I'm helping these kids after school, and it's kind of going along, and it's kind of getting really busy. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to transition, what do I need to do? And of course, I had to be concerned financially, how I could set it up in such a way to be able to, as a business model, to succeed. Because that's the other thing, a lot of coaches they don't really develop a business model, and then the whole thing falls apart because there's not enough for what needs to be done. So I sort of created a business model, what I thought needed to be done to succeed. And then also what I thought, like, the pedagogy of what I thought, like how many days a week kids should fence. Because, I felt like being a parent, I knew my kids had so many things going on, you had homework, blah, 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 blah. You can't be doing it like 5 days a week. So I kind of set up these things that I thought how it would structure and work within somebody. And then I set up a 10-year plan, which the bottom line was Olympic champions. And this was original thing was 2012, actually. And kind of every year, all the way cadet world champions, junior world champions, blah, 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 all the way to Y14, Y10s, kind of US and all that kind of stuff. So I developed a sort of whole set of goals that I had for myself. And I had it on the side of my desk. Every day I'd sit at my desk, I would look and say, okay, this is where it's at this year. And the goals I felt were important. It doesn't have to be exactly there, but very close. So the goal was like in 2008 to have somebody make the Olympic team or close to it. And then 2012, Olympic champions. That was kind of, and everybody thinks I'm crazy, right? But that's okay. I figured if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the right way. And Garrick happened to be part of that first wave of kids that I kind of got started. I had a group that started, and then about a year later, he joined because he wasn't part of the school that I used to teach at in the initial phase of Chinese American and French American schools. So, got a long story short, he got involved in the program, and then he started fencing, and then within 8-9 years, he made the Olympics. So, people laughed at me when I was like talking about the situation and what kind of my plan of action. But I was determined what I was going to do, and I ended up. And so everything was on pace. And then 2010, I had like senior world championships. You have to realize in 2010, there had not been any medal ever won by a USA male fencer in any weapon.
Really?
In the senior world championships. Never. And so my goal was to make the final 8 and then the next year medal. Well, Garrick got on the podium. So he was the first US Olympic male athlete to get a medal at the Senior World Championships in Paris in 2010. So we were right on pace. Unfortunately, he went off to college and he was actually at college at the time and ended up injuring his knee. And that really set him back. He had to have knee surgery, which was actually a second surgery and all this stuff. And then subsequently then barely made the 2012 team. So we kind of fell down on that situation. But then 4 years later, which was the next wave of kids, every 4 years of, setting these plans, Alexander was on that. So Alexander in 2012 was 18 years old, makes the Olympic team, with Garrick as well there, we ended up fourth, and then on the team, and then subsequently, obviously in 2016, which was the gold Olympic champions, we got the silver medal and bronze medal team. So, it's sort of like on pace for what I had on mind. But it took a lot of sort of thought and kind of going completely against. I mean, the number of people, and I don't want to mention names, but literally laughed in my face, who had fencers on the national team, said, "You're insane, ha, ha, ha." And then at the end, it's like, it's okay, no problem. That's more of a challenge for me.
Yeah, I mean, I love you mentioning that, like, practicing 5 days a week may not work for a lot of people. And I know when I was on like the junior national team, and I was like, Sabrina is on a volleyball team. Like, she has time to like exist and kind of be, like you said, like be a kid who has multiple interests, which is
Right.
incredibly important for anyone who wants to achieve something at a high level, to not feel, to be able to give your all to something because you're not feeling stifled by it. Like, you feel like it's something you're allowed to explore and work hard and do well in, but it doesn't consume you
Right.
as a person, particularly growing up.
Right. So my goal is basically 3 days of fencing a week. That's what it was. And Alexander, Garrick, they made the Olympic team at 18 years old doing that. 3 days a week and 2 lessons a week. That's it. And the other thing is, I'm also fair with everybody. Like, I have these set programs. Like, this is it. So it's like everyone follows the program, does whatever it is. And so therefore, then the cream will rise to the top. Nobody gets favoritism, not Alexander, not Sabrina, not Garrick, not whatever have you be. Now, of course, once they make the national team or preparing for world championships or things like that.
Different a little bit, yeah.
But in a general, like, Monday through Friday, going to school, doing all the regular things you're doing, that's what they were doing. But in addition to that, they also, like, Alexander was on the soccer team for a couple of years. He was on the basketball team in high school all 4 years. He was on the swim team for a couple of years. So he was able to do all kinds of different things as well. And I look at, people say it's cross-training. Well, it was just doing different things. So as a consequence, now he does more like physical, like routine workout that he has. So basically, it doesn't really matter to me as a coach what you do, so long as you're doing something else. And so you don't need to do that. And in doing so, I think you're also freer and more clean in your mind of what you want to do, rather than sort of getting sort of all tense because of what you're spending all your time doing.
Exactly. And cross training, but also, like you said, it's balance.
Right.
It's just providing them with balance. And I also want to say I admire what you said was very important. You had a plan. You had a 10-year plan. You had a business model. You did a lot of things that maybe someone who was just like, okay, I could do this. Let me just get into it. Maybe just start a club, that may not take into account, because you kind of approach that seriously. You approach everything else you're doing in your life, your advertisement, your own Olympic career, kind of doing it and doing it well, not just doing it arbitrarily. And also to highlight the idea of, you were like a very good referee. You kind of have all sides of it, which probably contributed to your ability to really cultivate great students, because you not only knew what it was like to fence, you know what it was like to watch and to evaluate, and then it kind of informed your coaching, I would think, of all of that, like, higher level information.
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is that I also, back in the day, I mean, I think nowadays we're all kind of locked into one weapon, which you end up kind of becoming, because you have to be able to do more. It's very hard to have all 3 weapons kind of going across the board. But, I benefited from fencing, saber and epee for fun. And many times I'd go to practices, and, there wouldn't be any foil fencers, so I'd fence saber, because there were saber fencers there. And so I was pretty tough in saber. You can ask Westbrook about that if you want sometime. And the same thing in epee. I was a pretty strong epee fencer. Actually, the only gold medal I won at the Pan Am Games was an epee team.
Interesting.
So, I was a pretty good epee fencer as well. But, I didn't really specifically train in those weapons, and I was a couple of junior world teams in epee, but I never trained in epee to speak of, or saber for that matter, but I just fenced them, and I understood what it was, and it kind of gave me a little different perspective
on fencing in general.
Right.
So my next question is, if you could maybe speak about, you've had a lot of top moments with your athletes. Could you talk about one of your favorite moments? I know there's probably a lot of moments that are amazing. Was there one moment that was as good as other moments, or that was particularly memorable for you?
Right. I mean, there's many great moments, I must
I
say, in
know.
my life, and it's really kind of hard. People win world championship. Sabrina winning the Youth Olympic gold medal in overtime. Those are dramatic moments.
Yeah.
Winning the Junior Worlds. Both Alexander and Sabrina. But I have to say that in many ways, I felt like, obviously what's most recent kind of comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that we won for the first time ever, the U.S. men's foil team won the world championship by team at the Senior World Championships in Budapest last year. I think to me that was a very symbolic thing because I was able to, obviously the M team had great success and US fencing men's foil has had great success. But the one thing that I felt like we lacked, we won junior world championships, team events, individual, actually individual senior team fencers, have won. But, the one thing was the team. And that's something I've always been working with the guys for now 6-7 years to kind of have that team to win the team, because that's a really hard thing to do. Individually, you can sometimes, have a good day and things happen and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But to win by team, it's really hard because it's a core of people that have to work together, and you're fencing against the top people in the world who live and train and are together. And so to be able to do that, that was probably the most challenging. And, but at the same time, we were, in my opinion, the best have been. And we've been ranked you have to realize in October, it will be 3 years that we are ranked #1 in the world, nonstop.
That's awesome.
It's pretty amazing, right? And those old timers who kind of see where fencing was before knew this wasn't happening. So to actually be able to finally win the world championship, I think that was a very symbolic thing for all of us, especially myself.
Yeah, and I think it kind of also adds to that multifaceted approach to fencing. You've cultivated Olympians, you've cultivated Olympic medalists, but like you said, that team event is just it's fencing, but it's a different kind of fencing. It takes different components to win that. So yeah, congratulations again.
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna go on to my last question, which has to do with kind of your impact and your foundation's impact. What do you think your foundation's impact has been on representation in our community in general, and then also kind of specifically with that kind of elevating the visibility of Asian American and multicultural fencers in our community?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is it's interesting because my good friend Peter Westbrook and roommate at Pan Am Games and Olympic Games and stuff, and we've also been in touch. We're really very long time friends, and he had started his foundation and obviously using Fencers Club. We didn't have that same kind of situation here on the West Coast. So it was a little different, but I felt like, I wanted to develop this level of champions and do whatever. And, obviously San Francisco Bay Area, they have a large Asian population. And as it happened to be that the kids sort of pre-K through 8th grade school was the Chinese American school.
Yeah.
So, that was our starting point anyway. And of course, my wife being Chinese and the kids being bilingual and so on and so forth. I think that those things were all kind of part of, as we kind of got started and developed where we were going to go. And I felt like, okay, I didn't specifically look at any specific, kind of ethnic group of sorts.
Of course.
But it's kind of like the reality of where we are in San Francisco, where, half the population is Asian.
Which is very impressive. And he also qualified for 2 more Olympic Games. Currently, he is training for the postponed Tokyo 2021 Olympic Games. His career highlights include a silver and bronze medal from the 2016 Olympic Games, a silver medal at the 2015 World Championships, and winning the Team World Championship with USA Men's Royal in 2019, and winning the overall World Cup in 2016 and 2017. So that's pretty impressive, and was a special moment for that team and for Alex. In terms of his academic career, Alexander attended Stanford University, where he majored in mechanical engineering, and he was a student athlete there as well. In his free time, Alex loves playing basketball, hanging out with his friends, and playing video games. He is a Golden State Warriors fan, or Warriors aficionado, as he likes to put it, and a boba lover. Let's hear what Alex had to say during his interview. How were you introduced to fencing and the Massialas Foundation?
I guess you could say I had the inroads into fencing. My father was a 3-time Olympian, and ever since I was born, I've pretty much had experience with the sport, whether it is just like running down the hallways and seeing the artwork on the walls, or playing with my dad's old fencing stuff, going to his old trophy case and whatnot. I've always had a huge fascination and a lot of experience with the sport. And with the Massialas Foundation, it was only natural that when he started his own fencing club, I wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah. That's great. Perfectly short and sweet. Awesome answer. To the point. So the next question for you is, what inspired you to pursue the Olympics or to pursue fencing at a higher level? Because, your dad fences, he makes a club, you fence, that's great, that's awesome. But then what for you was the driver to take it to the next level?
I actually think I wanted to be an Olympian before I wanted to be a fencer. Ever since I was a kid, my dad always really emphasized the Olympic values and the Olympic spirit, and the idea of the Olympics as a unifying experience and a unifying event. The values of the ancient Olympic Games about, laying down swords so warring states can come together to celebrate sport and celebrate the best of sport, has always been something that I hold really near and dear to my heart. It's something I, as a kid growing up and going to Greece and then visiting ancient Olympia and some of these places, it really felt those values really resonated with me, especially because the idea that sport can make the world a better place is something I truly believe in, and I think it's something my dad believes in as well. So even before I wanted to be a fencer, I wanted to be an Olympian, and I think that goal was always in the back of my head since the very beginning of my fencing career. But it's also something that drove me to try and be the best I could be in anything I did, whether it's sport or school as well. And I think the realization of that dream came when I was, 14 years old. I'd just seen Garrick make his first Olympic team in 2008. I think I just made my first cadet team actually in ownerGreg the year before, in 2008 as well. And it seemed like, that was this very start of hopefully a long and prosperous career. And then when I got my first top 16 result in the Senior World Cup that January, the Paris, in CIP of all the tournaments you could do it at, that was when I really believed that, hey, I actually have the ability, I have the opportunity to do this, and I'm going to take this to the next level. And from that moment forward, I definitely put in a little bit extra every practice, whether it was, just focusing a little bit more during the footwork and trying to get everything perfect, to sitting down and trying to sit down during the lessons, even if we're just doing handwork. You can always be working on your legs, even if you're doing handwork during a lesson, right? So it was that moment where I knew that, I made top 16, but I got, destroyed the next match to make the top 8. So I knew I was capable of great things, but I also knew I had so much farther to go to achieve true greatness. And
in terms of your development and like your commitment to what you wanted to do.
absolutely. And that was a driving force for me to move forward and truly be even more committed going forward in my career.
So great transition. So the next question is, what was it like for you to come away from Rio or to be at Rio and win not only one medal for yourself, and for your club, for your family, for you, but then also to win a medal for your team and for the United States team also, with your silver individual and then your bronze team medals.
I mean, that was an amazing experience through and through. Obviously, from the very beginning, the goal was to get 2 golds. I thought I was definitely capable of that, and I thought our team was capable of that. Obviously, it is a little bit bittersweet in the sense that I fell a little bit short of those goals. But at the end of the day, I do know the history that, those results made for the United States. And I do know I put in my heart on the strip when I was fencing out there to, get these 2 medals. I wish I'd fenced better in the team event against Russia to make that gold medal match in the Olympics. That was probably one of the worst team events I've fenced in my entire career, or team bouts I've ever fenced in my entire career. But, that's going through that and then being able to redeem myself and to go through redemption with our team in Budapest to win the World Championships in 2019. That's what made it even sweeter. I definitely thought we had a good chance at winning the whole thing in 2016. And I take a big responsibility for why we didn't. But that's something I tried to use to drive myself to become better and to do better in the team events, and make sure we operate as a unit, as a team, as best we can. And now with Tokyo coming up, hopefully in the next year, that's where the goals are set on, is to get gold there, to redeem, what I feel like we should have done and could have done in 2016. Just, in 2021 as opposed to 2020.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like, to your credit, oftentimes, for instance, you guys kind of won every single tournament in a year and then came in second at World Championships. But just to emphasize the fact that, coming in second and third at the Olympics is obviously not the same, but it's like very near coming in first, having 2 gold medals, because like at that level, like everyone is really, really great. And it just comes down to like moments, So like I totally, when you said like you guys could have won, you could have won individually and you guys could have won team, absolutely. But yeah, so like that's all I'm saying. Like you guys are like a gold medal Olympic team, even if you didn't win the gold medal. Like you are of that caliber.
I think the reason why, we take it so hard is we know we're that caliber. We just want to go out to the world and prove it.
And you have to do it in that moment at that time.
Absolutely.
That one day, that one event, that, 1 minute, 30 seconds where you have to make that touch.
You got to rise to the occasion.
Claim it. But you guys, you'll do it. But my next question kind of goes back to the M team, and it's about, how does the M team community, how has that impacted you and your fencing career?
I mean, the M team community is almost everything in my fencing career. It's where I started. It's the coaches I've known there from the very beginning. I've formed bonds with like all the fencers that have come through there, and I still stay friends with a lot of the fencers to this day, even after they retired. And even if they didn't fence in university, didn't fence in college, a lot of these people I still keep in contact with, and I'm still good friends with. When you see someone, and are training with them at the highest level 3 to 4 times a day, 3 to 4 times a week, every week for so many years, you guys go through something, and you form a special bond that really can't be found otherwise, right? That's such a unique experience. I'm sure that's the same case with a lot of clubs. But that's one of the reasons why I believe in the beauty of sport. It's this unifying experience that everyone goes through. And for me, the M team was fundamental in that. And you know, as I said, yeah, to this day, I'm friends with so many of our graduates and people who were fencers on the M team, and then people on the M team that introduced me to other fencers in the United States and in the world, right? So it really, the M team was so foundational for me and formative, and it continues to be as I, you know, kind of get older and get more experience. And I'm no longer the young kid at the club. I'm actually one of the elder statesmen, which is such a vast difference from what I'm used to and what I grew up doing, especially when I first was trying to make my first Olympics team, right? I was still just a little kid, definitely a little pipsqueak. So to be the elder statesman that, you know, people want to get advice from, and people, you know, kids want to approach me to get help and get my perspective on things, and then, you know, helping run classes here and there. It's a really nice transition, and it kind of shows how the fencing club can be formative all the way through, you know, your childhood years, even to being an adult as well.
Thank you for that. That was a really sweet answer. One moment, I'm just gonna say hi, Doris. I have one more question for Alex, and then I'll go on to asking your questions. But yeah, we did Greg,
Hi,
Alex,
Doris.
and then you'll be right up after. I just have one more question for Alex. And here's the question. So my question for you, my last question is, how do you think the M team and its fencers have impacted the demographic of fencing, kind of have impacted representation of the fencing community or added to that?
You know, I think I'm very proudly Asian American. I think I have always been very proud to be Chinese American growing up in San Francisco. And that's still something I hold very near and dear to my identity to this day. I think we're in a place in America where there isn't a ton of Asian American representation in sports.
Yes.
And I'm really proud to be one of these people to represent the Asian American community, because it is an area where I think we're vastly underrepresented, especially at the elite level. And, you know, to be part of a system that has produced a lot of great Asian American athletes is something I take a lot of pride in. You know, ever since I was a kid, I went to Chinese American International School. My mom's Chinese. I went back to Taiwan almost every other year to visit family and stuff. So I'm very much in touch with my Asian heritage and my Chinese heritage. And, you know, to be able to go out there and, you know, try and fence the best I can, and, you know, be able to achieve such great results and stuff, it makes a lot sweeter when I know I'm representing more than just myself. I'm representing not only the United States, but Asian Americans, you know, all over Asian Americans and Asians all over the world. I think fencing and our club has shown that there can be great Asian American athletes, especially in the sport of fencing, but, you know, all over the place. I think we just need the opportunity to be represented and to see people ahead of us that look like us too. I mean, even though my goals and my, you know, ideas were set on the Olympics from a very young age, having Garrick go through the cycle 4 years ahead of me, even though it was for me at the time, I was just like, oh, you know, it's another one of my dad's students. I don't care if he's Asian or not, but it does help when the person in front of you doing these great things looks a little bit like you. And I just hope that I can do the same for generations behind me.
Yeah, and I want to let you know, you definitely have. There are a lot of people, you've kind of, I feel like you guys have gotten to the point where you're able to just represent great fencing in addition to just, you know, having whatever cultural background that you have. And I think that that's also so important for it to be like the best fencer in the US or the best fencer in the US are people who are different ethnicities. You know, there's not one sort of fencer who looks the part or matches the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can be part of that, and I know our club has done a great job of getting that kind of representation out there, whether it be with me and my sister, Garrick, the Willettes,
Yeah.
the Bravos. I think, just being able to showcase our diversity is a humongous asset to sports in general.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate you once again for giving your wisdom and your thoughts.
Thanks, Iman.
Let's talk about Doris Willette. Doris Willette is a women's foil fencer and Olympian born in Lafayette, California. Doris traveled to Beijing as a replacement athlete in the 2008 Olympic Games and went on to compete in the next 3 senior world championships. Her career highlights include competing on 5 senior national teams, a 2011 team Pan American champion, and a 2012 Olympian. In terms of her academic career, Doris attended Penn State University and she majored in advertisement. During her time at Penn State, she became a 2-time NCAA champion. Pretty dope. Since the 2012 Olympic Games, Doris Willette has retired. After fencing, she really got into cooking, healthy eating, and body optimization. Cool. Now she's focused on being a good mom to her infant son. Let's hear what Doris had to say in her interview. First question is, how were you introduced to fencing and the M team, the Massialas Foundation?
So I started fencing because I was actually, I did a bunch of sports as a kid, gymnastics, judo, fencing was a part of that. For me, I was painfully shy as a kid, and my dad really wanted me to sort of get out there and get into sports, and he thought fencing was really great and had a good opportunity for, girls and boys at a young age to be on pretty equal footing. And so he really liked that aspect as well. So my brother and I actually started at the same time at a club called Swordplay with George Platt. And in that time, we were just really casually fencing, didn't really, know about this whole other world of high competition and things like that until finally it was like, no, you guys are pretty good. Like, maybe you should travel into the city. And I was with another club then and, had a little bit of a rough time in the 2008 Olympics and then switched over to Greg. Best decision I ever made. And since then, I think being a part of M Team has really been an incredibly unique experience, one being in San Francisco at such a prominent club, but also, when I joined, there was already so much success and amazing results from the club, and having someone like Greg, who you knew was really, very, very smart about the game, but then B, you knew someone had your back. I think that was like a really big boost for me. So it made a huge difference in my fencing and just the way I felt about myself and how I was able to sort of keep fencing and fence a lot stronger than I ever had.
That was a great answer. What inspired you to pursue the Olympics? And what drove you to fence at such a high level? Because like you said, you started off at like kind of casually fencing, and then they were like, wait a minute, I think you should look more deeply into what you can do in this area. So what drove you to say, okay, I want to be an Olympian, or I want to do the work and fence at that high level to get to the point to being an Olympian?
Mm-hmm. So I think, I definitely had some good results early on, and those good results get addictive. You win a couple here or there, and as a young kid, you're like, okay, I can do this. This is fun. I like winning. So it just kind of continued in a really natural path for me, wanting to achieve more and more. And as the competition got stiffer and harder, it was just one of those things where, you have to put in the work if you want to be able to achieve that level of success. So it was the continued competition. And I think as I was getting stronger, the U.S. was also getting stronger. So there was just a lot of great, resources within the U.S. and amazing competitions. I think starting from when I was pretty young, we had the Bay Cup in the Bay Area, which I think was really helpful when I was younger. And then, going to national competitions and raising the stakes to international competitions, it just shows you this whole world out there and really inspires you to want to compete at that level.
Yeah, I think it's like when you see people doing these things, like Alex mentioned, seeing Garrick make that Olympic team, when you think, wow, like I kind of want to be like that. I want to be excellent like that, or fence an excellent finals bout and stuff like that, come back from being low like that. All those things that you see on the international circuit, those kind of triumphs.
Yeah,
athletic
absolutely.
triumphs kind of make you be like, I want to be cool like that.
Yeah.
um, you kind of touched on this when you talked about joining the Massialas Foundation, but how has the M Team community impacted you in your fencing career?
Well, I think, obviously having a lot of good fencers, I think is really helpful in elevating your fencing. You go to practice and you have all these amazing people to compete with, and it really raises your bar and your game, and you're exposed, or at least for me, I felt like I was exposed to a lot of different fencing. I think for 2012, it was myself, Alex Simmons, David, Garrick, Alexander, obviously Sabrina. So having this variety of fencing, I think, was really helpful. And beyond that, I think the community at the M Team is unparalleled. I really, really believe that the support from not just Greg and Vivian and the kids, but the parents, they're so involved and they really care. And, Greg's just done such a good job of making sure that this is an open environment for people to really come together. And I think that's helpful, not just for me, but for everyone who's kind of come up through the M Team.
Thank you for that. And my last question is, what do you think the impact of the M Team and its fencers has been on representation in the greater fencing community? Kind of particularly looking at the representation and visibility of Asian American and multicultural Asian American fencers.
I mean, I have to imagine that it's pretty undeniable the impact that the M Team has had on U.S. fencing. Representation, we know, really does matter, and I think I look back, and I've actually been really fortunate in women's foil alone. Having Iris and Felicia and Emily. A lot of representation in the multicultural community has been great for me, and I think that the M Team has only continued to sort of build that and give more representation to people. And I see now, it feels like fencing has such a strong Asian American community that it just makes me really proud. And I love to see, Asian Americans succeed in this sport. And, overhearing Alex's comments on that too, I totally agree. Having so many Asian American fencers succeed in fencing and sort of raising the bar and the level in the past, couple quadrennials to really see results at the Olympic level, I think has done a world of good to not only the fencing community, but beyond.
Yeah, and I think something notable is, when I'm growing up, I'm seeing fencing as like a sport where people say it's like it has a lot of like white people and then a lot of Asian American or Asian people in it. But that was not always the case. It wasn't.
No, and
That's
I mean,
relatively recent when you talk about kind of how long we've been having fencing in the Olympics, how like the developments in fencing. That's like the last 20-25 years. That wasn't always the case.
yeah, I would even say if that. I mean, when I was competing, I didn't feel like there were this many. I mean, coming back now, Greg's been nice enough to invite me back to a few competitions to help coach, which is actually another thing I should mention is pretty great about the community. Having a lot of the older kids come back when they can to be able to coach the younger ones and keep that community circle going, I think is really important. But seeing a lot of the young blood these days and seeing the representation from the Asian American community is pretty astounding.
Thank you for tuning in to this interview. This is what a fencer looks like interview. We were so happy to have you. If you're interested in hearing from more athletes about their narratives and what they love about the sport and their involvement in the sport, you can watch our other interviews on our YouTube channel, Aspire to Inspire Initiative, or on IGTV at Aspire to Inspire Initiative. So we hope that you engage more in our community and have a wonderful day.